We're welcoming back Ted Sevransky, professional sports bettor out of Las Vegas. And Ted and I are going to talk about a very interesting NCAA basketball game tonight, Xavier versus Providence. And this is a game, two tightly matched teams in some sense. Xavier 17-2 on the year, Providence 17-3. And of course, record has nothing to do with it. Xavier, 2 losses on the year. One, of course, was opening day when they got blown out by Villanova. And of course, the second one was Georgetown, a team that I personally, Ted, think that they overlooked. First and foremost, welcome back. Thank you for the input that you give to us and our viewers. They're enjoying it, this series that we're doing. So if you will, break down this Xavier-Providence game and where might be the hidden tool to grab that ticket that's going to cash tonight in college hoops.
Sure. Well, I mean, you talked about the 2 losses that Xavier has suffered this season, and both losses, the exact same thing happened. It was on the defensive end of the court where Xavier came up short. Each of their 2 opponents that beat them shot better than 50% from the floor. Providence isn't shooting many 50% games these days. In fact, 37% shooting in their last 5. They've gone cold in Big East play, and it's not a surprise. Providence is a team that relies very heavily on their 2 stars. You've got Chris Dunn, obviously, and the big man, who's just been, 19 points a game. He's been an absolute monster for them. But aside from that duo, the balance isn't really there for the Friars, and it is for Xavier. Xavier's got 6 guys averaging 8.5 points per game or more. And you talked about how they may have overlooked Georgia, and I agree with that. They were -10 in that game. They just were flat. I don't hold it against Xavier moving forward, and certainly Xavier's not a team that I have any concerns backing in hostile environments. But the reality is, Mike, the point spread here is set based on season-long numbers. But there's a factor in play tonight that you can throw out all the season-long numbers. It absolutely hurts Providence and helps Xavier.
Well, Ted, in saying that, I mean, here's a for instance, and Xavier, and again, this is kind of piggybacking what you said. I mean, they got strength coming off the bench. That James Farr, he came off the other day. All right, he poured in 24 points, had 15 boards. But here's a key stat from a big man that I really enjoy because it's kind of old school basketball when it was taught from John Wooden. All right, he's 18 for 19 from the free throw line his last 3 games. So I like that consistency, and I know Providence has struggled. I was aware of the 37%. There's somewhat a defensive side of them, though. It reminds me of the old Patino days. Any resemblance there for you? And how do you think they try to change what's happening offensively as far as this poor shooting? How can they maybe look to change that tonight against Xavier? Or is that something that Xavier's just going to capitalize on?
I don't think it's going to be necessarily very easy for Providence to get out of their shooting slump tonight. First of all, Xavier plays in-your-face defense. I'm not going to call it Patino defense because the pressure isn't there wall to wall. But in terms of half-court sets, Xavier is pretty sticky on the defensive end. But perhaps more importantly, this is a miserable, miserable spot for the home underdog. What's up? Simple. They're coming off an overtime win against Villanova. The Villanova-Xavier duo is the toughest duo you're going to face in the Big East. Providence has them on back-to-back games. And they won in overtime. That game was supposed to be played on Saturday. The blizzard delayed it. Instead, it was played on Sunday. So now you only have 1 day's turnaround time coming off an intense overtime win on the road at Nova. Ed Cooley after the game, that was an unbelievable win. The minutes for Providence in that game, again, you talk about guys that don't get off the floor. Dunn played 43 minutes. Bentel's the guy whose name I couldn't think of a minute ago as the Friars' leading scorer. He played all 45 minutes. So you have a Providence team coming off a huge overtime win with no time to prepare, no time to rest up, and they're facing an opponent that plays defense. The season-long powering number says, yeah, this game's supposed to be really close. The situation for me, so obvious. Providence is not in a good spot tonight. Xavier is rested and ready and prepared to make amends for an overtime loss they suffered on this floor last year. So I don't think that Providence necessarily solves those shooting woes this evening.
Ted, you've broken down a lot of games since I've been doing these videos with you, and I'm just saying this with all due respect. I don't know that I've had a better breakdown or a reason why I would feel more confident in a play than what you just presented. And I mean it was art. It was poetry in motion. All right. 90% probably of the betting public doesn't know about that snowstorm. They may not know that. I personally think Providence coming off that huge win against Villanova, I mean, that was absolutely, nobody saw that coming. I think in a way that drained their tank. I think that quenched their thirst, and I think you're absolutely right. They're sitting at home. My only puzzlement to this, and this is a question, you're in Vegas, you know more about, how the movements go and everything else. How come, I know they're basing it probably on a season-long type of matchup, but how come the books haven't adjusted because of that information you just gave me, especially with the big man playing, if I'm correct, 45 minutes? How come the lines haven't adjusted, and do you think this might move before tip-off?
That's a great question, and the answer is it's fairly easy to understand. All right, books are forced to put up not dozens, hundreds of college football point spreads every single week. And when you have to put up all of these point spreads on all of these games with a relatively short amount of time to make the lines for those games, you're going to rely on computer generated numbers. And certainly bettors can see, get a good idea of where the point spreads are going to be. You look at some of the advanced metric sites, the Sagarin numbers or the Jeff Palm numbers, or sorry, the Ken Palm numbers are absolutely utilized on a daily basis by both the bookmakers and the bettors to set up baseline point spreads. And then the markets adjust from there. So we have seen a little bit of Providence money, or sorry, a little bit of money against Providence based on the situation, but the numbers very rarely get bet far away from where the advanced metric stats say they should be. So when you're looking as a bettor, where are the edges? It's my whole philosophy and strategy as a sports bettor, it's little edges over time is where you get your advantage. This is one of those games, not a huge edge. It's a legitimate edge, however. Here's the season-long numbers that put the power rating here. This particular spot is bad for the home team. It's a little edge. It's probably worth a point or two, maybe three at the most, but it's worth something. And when you factor in those little edges and you get those little edges day after day after day, that's how you end up making a profit with your sports betting over the long term. So that's what I try to do. That's what I try to relate to the viewers on videos like this one. It's not about, 10-star lock, 100-star million that can't lose. Plays lose. This play could lose. But these little edges where you see the power rating numbers creating a point spread where the situation stands out that maybe those power rating numbers aren't right for this particular game, that's where I make my money. And I hope that's where you make your money too.
Yeah, Ted, that's really some good wisdom. That little edges, what that reminds me of, and you said how you take it in time, the little edges. That reminds me of and it's something you had quoted before, that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So that kind of goes hand in hand with that. I like your thinking on this, and viewers, I hope you take this like a sponge and grab this information, because it's very, very wise, and it's going to lead to profit. So another factor I'm going to throw in, Ted, not only all the facts that you just stated with the snowstorm, everything else, and them having such a big emotional win against Nova, and then the big man's got to be tired. All right, here's another thing. They're only 5-6 at home against the spread to boot. So that right there just, I'm not only throwing the hook in the water, but I'm going to pull one out on this one. I like that play. Ted, thanks so much for this breakdown. Viewers, I hope you got out of this what I did, and it was very, very knowledgeable. Xavier, -1.5. Grab it now, because it might move before tip-off. Don't know that that's going to be a big factor. Ted, thanks so much for being back with us, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow and breaking down another game.